That's quite a short period of time. It's like you're saying 18 months ago, it felt a little bit different to
Yeah.
what you are now. What do you think's helped shifted that? Because that's rapid, reasonable pace, isn't it, in terms of shifting, in terms of the big things that you're talking about, and
Yeah, it
organisations
is.
aspire around open conversations and all that sort of stuff. That's always difficult for people.
I think there were, there's people that have been at IHG for years that I've encountered that are that way anyway. And there are obviously people who've always been like that, but maybe it wasn't pushed from the top,
right? Okay.
So to speak. So one of the things that I do know, when Keith first became CEO, and he's worked for IHG, I think like 20 odd years, and he was head of Greater China, and he's worked all over the world, worked in America, and now obviously resides in the UK. But one of the first things he did was set up a global diversity and inclusion board, one of his first actions. And I think things like that make a statement and say, we're doing things differently. We're still incredibly smart business people. We're still, everything about our business is important to us. But actually, there's certain things that we've missed out and we haven't done as much as we should have that we need to set the pace on. So I think he did quite a few things, and one of those being the global D&I board. And I think he had quite a clear vision as to what that was going to look like and how we're going to focus on people, because it is rapid, but I think it probably just freed up the people that had wanted to lead in that way to do it. I don't think it was kind of like, everyone now change and can we have a new mindset? I think everyone that I've encountered that's got relatively long service in IHG is very people focused and very honest and the kind of people you want to work with. So I think it just freed people to kind of go, oh, okay, brilliant. I'm not the lone wolf maybe in this function, or I'm not, I am kind of, Yeah.
So like that whole piece around like that global leadership bit. I mean, you operate in so many different countries, don't you? And must be so many different cultures and subcultures and leadership styles and everything else. I mean, what have you seen in this period, and kind of what stuff have you learned about that?
Even in the best of times, it's one of the most difficult things to navigate, especially when it comes to leadership, because different countries or regions have a different approach to authority, a different approach to equality, a different approach to open communication, and how the state and its citizens interact with one another, which it affects affects what leaders you can have in those kind of environments. I think one of the most interesting things for me, having never worked for a global company, was obviously this was already happening in Greater China, kind of when, before everything kind of happened here. And it was very clear to see the efficiency of leadership in that part of the world, should we say, because immediately, you saw in the news about building hospitals and everything, but immediately kind of, I think we've got 3 or 4 hotels in Wuhan, kind of the epicenter of it. And they were immediately shut down, opened up to aid workers, opened up to support workers. Wow. And there's been a lot, and the MD of the Greater China region did kind of a long podcast about just his immense pride in how the colleagues in those hotels and in across China, but obviously in that region and in Wuhan itself, the city, there was a real kind of people just worked non-stop and were at the hotel all the time, just providing food, providing support for the medical staff. And it was just a real all hands on deck. And I think that was kind of pushed by the MD in terms of his leadership. It was like, right, what can we do? It wasn't about, oh, we're going to lose all this revenue, or we're going to, it was like, okay, we are in this, we're in this community, we're part of this community, let's just get in. And I think that shows kind of, I suppose the efficiency of leadership is one way to kind of think about it, but there was no hesitation just to help out and be supportive. I think one of the most tricky things, it's being honest, it's tricky, is when it's come to, well, there could have been a real ease of when it's come to kind of discussing everything that's been risen about racial inequalities in the last few months. It could have been really easy for a company to say, well, we're not going to talk about it with this region, we're not going to talk about it in this country. But actually, it's just been, again, going back to that kind of honest and authentic, we're going to talk about this because we have a corporate head office in Atlanta in the States where a lot of our colleagues are Black and they are being affected by this in this country. But we're going to explain to people what's happening and we're going to support whatever people want to do. And, there are certain parts of the world where equality and diversity isn't very high on the agenda, or isn't a very diverse population. So the understanding isn't there. But there hasn't been any, oh, well, we'll tell those people not to make it visible, or we'll tell these people. It's been, you're a leader in this company, and we espouse certain values and how people are treated. So that it goes without question. But I think it's been really interesting to see almost the commonalities more than the differences. I think there'd be a temptation to kind of go, well, obviously in these certain countries, this wouldn't happen or that hasn't happened. But it's been very heartening to see the commonalities of looking after people and just putting people before profit, and being able to influence hotel owners who, some people we have a raft of owners in terms of it's their whole business and they have many, many hotels, and some people they just have one and it's their whole livelihood and it's kind of all their whole life. So trying to influence those people as to what the best thing to do is for colleagues rather than profit has been really interesting. But I found there's more commonalities than differences, I think. And it'd be almost a bit lazy to lean back on, oh, well, that country doesn't do that or this country doesn't do that. Actually, there's a lot of time spent at the best of times to push people and to challenge people as to why isn't that done and why isn't that done that way and why aren't people treated like this. So actually it's almost been like, well, in a crisis people need even more of that rather than backing off, which is really good to see.
It's so refreshing to hear that, isn't it, in terms of, because I think you see on the outside so many organisations giving lip service to a lot of these big points. But underneath the surface, I think actually no one still really believes it, or actually when you're in the organisation not believing it. So just what you've just said, I think you pointed out so many real examples where it's just very tangible rather than just a nice statement written somewhere.
Yeah, and I think it's, if you think about going back to Greater China, that's not a work from home culture, not at all. And the colleague, and so there's been a whole shift of trust in terms of those colleagues can work at home. Even with flexible working or working at home being relatively prevalent in the UK, there's still been a whole, but how do you know people are working? How do you know people close their laptops for 8 hours a day? So if you think about a country like Greater China, where that just is not the culture, you do not work from home. It's been really good to see that, again, the leadership has been, it's about safety, it's about people first, and seeing how obviously they're kind of always a few months ahead of us because of when things have happened. So they're now kind of back in the office and kind of and on last sort of talent calls were with them, they were just talking about development programs and talking about, it's kind of almost back to normal. But I think it's been a real test of the leadership there to see that people can work in a different way, which is never been.
I still think, even though in the UK we've been working in a different way for a reasonable time, it still makes me laugh when people are working from home now, because they almost answer their calls a lot quicker just to prove that they're still sitting there.
Absolutely.
There's this weird psyche still, isn't there, about I need to be at my desk and I need to prove that I'm being busy and all that sort
Even
of stuff.
if your output's exactly the same, it's kind of that, and you kind of, you don't think about stepping away from your desk for an hour to have lunch in the office. But you feel supremely guilty if you nip to the shop or it's very strange. And I think that's something that's going to have to be overcome and delved into quite deeply to make sure that there is a real true consensus across the board that it's just as valuable. It's just as valuable.
And that's okay.
The country businesses haven't shut down over the last 6 months. Everyone's kept producing output. So
that's interesting.